One thing I'm really interested in is that as an exited founder, has it been what you expected? And if it hasn't, what surprised you the most?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think one of the interesting things that we did that differs from a lot of founders is we took 30% of the money invested into the business at each stage off the table. So when we first raised money in 2011, 30% of the cash went to the hard-working, low-paid founders, which for me was about $1 million at the time. And then when we had the financial investment, again, we took 30% off the table. We're selling down our own equity basically, rather than just issuing more shares and the cash going into the business. So, you know, we it wasn't like we'd sort of just had a sort of salary, and then all of a sudden we'd sold the business and had lots of cash. It was we'd taken stuff off and we'd sort of got accustomed to what it was like to sell equity and to have a little bit more money along the way. And I think that's really interesting. And one of the things that we used to talk about was that the reason for that is to de-risk the business. If all of your wealth and everything you've got is tied up in your company, then it changes the way you make decisions. You become more conservative. You don't tend to kind of want to sort of do anything that might rock the boat. And also you kind of founders always have a overinflated idea of what their business is worth. Whereas if you've managed to sort of sell a bit down and you've made a bit of cash along the way, you've got a much broader understanding of what it is to sell your equity, and the fact that you're not as invested. It's not like 100% of my wealth is tied up in Tiger Spike. I've taken a bit off, so when I get, obviously it was a much larger chunk when we sold the business, but it didn't feel like it was just this huge sudden sort of lottery win. It was a little bit different. It felt like a sort of a culmination of a series of steps. In terms of what it is to be an exited founder, you don't realize it's a relatively small club, and I don't say that sort of flippantly. There's a lot of people who talk about what it's like to sell a business and to do it, and success has many fathers, and failure is an orphan. But the people who actually have the equity and have sold the business and made that money, it's interesting. For some people, sort of the money and the financial reward is sort of a way of keeping score. If you got 5 mil, then you're not as good as someone who got 50 mil. And if you've got 100 mil, then you're way better than anybody else. From my perspective, it gave me the freedom pretty much to do whatever I wanted. And I think the thing that surprised me is that I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And I've spoken to other people, and they're really bored. They don't have anything else. I'm quite fortunate because I'm quite passionate about golf, and I've thrown myself into golf, and I play quite a lot. The one thing that has surprised me recently is that you realize that when you have that opportunity to kind of to decide what it is you want to do, you you know you have it takes a certain type of mentality to be able to kind of to live that way, to not be told that you have to be in the office at 9 o'clock, or you have to be on this Zoom call, you have to do it. It takes and exactly the same as we were at Tiger Spike all the way along. You had to turn up, do stuff, go to meetings, make sales, win business, prove you were innovative and you kind of ahead of the curve, that sort of thing. And then when suddenly all that's removed, and you have to define yourself in a different way. It's not Oliver from Tiger Spike, or it's not Oliver, head of innovation, or whatever it might be. It's just Oliver. And when you tell people you play golf, it's sometimes kind of hard to relate if people are worrying about their mortgage and stuff's going wrong somewhere, and the most important thing you have is a 9:30 tea time. And that sort of, I think only in the last 12 months, so it'll be 5 years in July, I've started to want to do something more and to be able to kind of take what I've learned and apply it in some sort of meaningful way. And that's kind of where I'm at now. That's what excites me the most about DQ, is because it's an opportunity to kind of use that knowledge and that kind of the journey that I've been on, and help other people who are thinking about starting that or doing it. What it's about, what does sort of success look like? What do people think of as success? Is it $10 million? Is it $100 million? Is it being able to buy my mum a house? What are those things that you really look for? And I think one of the things that I've I'm quite fortunate or quite fortunate about myself and my situation, is that now that we've sort of exited the business and we're in a position where we don't necessarily need to to work or get a paycheck again. It's kind of then how do you choose to spend your time? So for me, it's about the one thing I've always said is success for me is how many other people I make successful. So how can I help somebody else achieve their definition of success? So if their definition of success is $5 million or $10 million or buying a house or making enough money from their own business to pay off their mortgage, whatever it might be, if I can do that for people, then that's me achieving success. It's no longer about what I can do and need because I'm sort of in a position where I don't need to worry about that. But my wife recently sold her business. Her exit was hugely successful. That was definitely in that sort of 10 to 50 kind of range, rather than the sort of the $100 million exit. But it was perfect for the nature of her business and what she was doing.
Yeah, just drop that in there. It was substantially lower than my exit.
Yeah, make sure that makes the video.
Yeah, exactly.
But relative to the time spent, it was way better. So if you divide the length of time she worked on the company by the amount she made, then she's way ahead. So it's
Well,
kind
we'll
of
edit that bit out.
it's all yeah. And as long as you keep in Tiger's Right was her idea, she'll be fine. Recording, but I don't have any massive goal. Like I don't want to climb Everest or do anything. I'm quite comfortable just trying, like living in the present.
Content.
Yeah, and it's living in the present. It's like focusing on where the kids are going to go to school. And I was talking to somebody the other day. 3.5 years, Charlie will be applying for universities, which is a terrifying thought. And then Scarlett's going to be doing that. It's really about just like the next thing, that one thing that's in front of you. I don't need not trying to think about where I'll be when I'm 50 or what's happening in the next 10 years. I don't know if that's a good way to be or a bad way to be, but that's certainly where I'm at the moment. The one thing I think probably the thing that is most satisfying is not the word, but the one thing is that you talk about in marriages and in relationships where often finance and money is a massive deal, and whether what you're earning and whether mortgage and who earns the money and where are we going to go and how are we going to pay for this and projecting into the future, and if your job isn't good enough, then you're not good enough, that sort of thing. And I think having made money where that no longer becomes an issue has made a massive difference to my relationship, to my marriage, because I think, and not because she still thinks I'm a twat and whatever, but just money is just not something that we ever think about. And it's not like we don't go out and I haven't got Maseratis and buy fast cars and boats and that sort of stuff. It's not the thing, because that's not really what either of us worry about. But you just don't have to, you don't think about money in the same way. And this is really hard. This is something that you can only talk about with other people who've in that situation, because everybody thinks about money, and it's such a big deal in so many relationships, and it's such a thing that causes so many issues and problems. When you remove that, then it makes it's just such a it's like the whole thing just comes off your shoulders. You don't think about it at all. And it's weird because it's not as if we had massive problems before. Like we were never in a really horrible situation and things were never really bad. But it was one of those things that you'd argue about. Things would, who was how, when you couldn't afford things and you were worried about kids' education, all this stuff, it all becomes a big deal. And when finance as an issue is removed from your relationship, it's incredible. And it's so interesting, is coming back to Australia and hanging out with friends who they're still working in, good jobs and getting paid well and that sort of stuff, but they still have that issue with how am I going to pay off the mortgage, and will I have enough to retire, and what am I going to do when I'm 60? And that's just something that it's not even part of our vernacular anymore. So that's something that it's difficult because you can't talk to too many people about that. I have to say, it's not a conversation that many people can relate to, because that is still very much a part of their, you only need 2 or 3 of your 60 startup investments to pay off, James, and you'll be flying around the world in that private jet. But that's not about flying about the world in a private jet. It's about not having to worry about money conversations with your wife. That's the, I don't know how to relate. I don't know how to, you know what I mean? Like,